Today we're going to be looking at another heavily requested Kurzgesagt video. Specifically, are you an NPC? NPC referring to a non-player character in a video game. I'm assuming they're referring to NPCs in the concept of real life as people that are just following scripts, subroutines, without any self-awareness or introspection. I don't think so. Even if you're going by the whole universe as a simulation theory, I still feel that I have free will. Then again, that could just be part of the trick. The better question is, do you want NPCs running your nuclear power plants? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler Folse. I'm a nuclear engineer with a little over 10 years of experience in the commercial nuclear power industry. From engineering operations to emergency response. Don't claim to know everything there is nuclear, but I can certainly share some knowledge. Let's see what this is all about.
Free to choose what you do and make decisions? Or are you an NPC, unable to decide anything for yourself? You feel that you have control over your life, or at least what you'll have for breakfast. But this may be an illusion. Physics...
So we're getting into the whole free will thing. Now, if you're an NPC, what if you're a glitchy NPC, though?
Actually may force you to go through life as if on rails, with no free will at all. You experience free will all the time, like when you decided to watch this video instead of doing something useful.
Really? Having contempt for your audience there, buddy?
Will is your ability to decide by yourself what you do. It means that the future is an open arena that you can shape with your actions. It's at the core of human relationships. It means you are responsible for your actions, which is the basis of our moral and legal systems.
True.
There are too many dimensions for one short video: moral, psychological, biological, so we'll focus on the most essential part. Is free will even possible? Two main philosophical camps are fighting about this. No matter how we represent them, they'll be upset about it, so we'll use our own words. The first camp claims that the very idea of free will is fundamentally incompatible with the laws of the universe. You are an NPC. Whatever you exactly are, it's somehow made up of your physical brain and body. And these are made of cells, which are made of proteins, which are made of atoms and particles like protons or electrons. So fundamentally, you're a specific, quite lovely, dynamic pattern of particles.
I mean, that's true that we are consistent of made up of cells, made up of molecules, made up of atoms, but it's kind of the idea that we're more than the sum of the parts. We are working together, and it's how we use those parts would be the opposition to this. And after all, in nuclear physics, we know that on the subatomic level, you're not equivalent to the sum of your parts. Otherwise, nuclear fission and nuclear fusion wouldn't work very good. But I know that's a little different than what they're saying, but it's at least the first thing I think of.
Particles have no will, no motivation, no freedom. They blindly follow the laws of physics. And we don't know why, but most laws of physics are deterministic, which means that things happen the way they do because of the things that came before.
That's true. I've yet to know anyone who actually broke a law of physics, though it sounds really cool.
You play pool and hit a ball at a specific speed and angle. The laws of physics tell you exactly how all the balls on the table will behave.
But the laws of physics don't tell you to hit the ball, though, is what's different. It's where where the line is. Obviously, you make your action, then the universe will respond in accordance with the laws of physics.
Recoil directions, everything. These laws completely decide the behavior of all balls on the table. At the microscopic level, things work very much like that, only without players. Actions and reactions affect all the particles in the universe, creating a chain of causal effects that extends throughout time, from the past to the future.
Can you imagine what it would be like to be a player on the atomic scale? Well, you just wouldn't last very long.
Things happen, making other things happen. Now imagine that if right after the Big Bang, a super smart supercomputer looked at every single particle in the universe and noted all their properties. Just by applying the deterministic laws of physics, it should be able to predict what all the particles in existence would be doing until the end of time. But if you're made of particles and it's technically possible to calculate what particles will do forever, then you never decided anything. Your past, present, and future were already predetermined and decided at the Big Bang.
So this is where the whole determinism, at least in terms of philosophy, comes from. Now, so I'm not a philosopher, and I'm sure there's many who would disagree with this, but couldn't free will and determinism actually be compatible? Like free will, and by free will I mean acting towards one's desires and intentions, even if they are determined by prior causes, the Big Bang, and they were pre-mapped by this computer. You could still act in a way that's consistent, because said computer could be looking at multiple outcomes and branching paths anyway. Unless it's a computer looking at the Big Bang from outside the universe, meaning it had already seen the future. But you could, I guess, still get into branching paths, depending on which versions of the future you're dealing with. And I'm assuming whether or not you knew about the existence of the computer, that might affect your decision making. Or not, depending on what it is. Like I said, not a philosopher though.
That would mean there is a kind of fate, and you are not free to decide anything. You may feel like you make decisions, but you're actually on autopilot. The motions of the particles that make up your brain cells that made you watch this video were decided 14 billion years ago. You're just in the room when it happens.
The problem with that is you still have the introspection and experience, though, unless you truly are operating in zombie mode, doing things without thinking. But even if it's without thinking, you don't necessarily have to be actively using the cognitive part of your brain. You could be doing things according to what you're feeling in your body. Like, when I decide to eat a big bucket of fried chicken, I'm usually not thinking up here, I'm thinking down in my belly. So who's to say the brain is the single source of truth in decision-making anyway?
You're only witnessing how the universe inside you unfolds in real time. But this can't be true because of quantum mechanics, right? Quantum processes are intrinsically random, not deterministic, and can't be predicted with total certainty. On the quantum pool,
I guess unless you're looking at it historically, I don't know when that computer inserted itself, but you could still estimate it though using a probability mapping function, kind of how you track nuclear reactions. It's just a giant Monte Carlo type simulation.
balls can go randomly left or up or banana. Their behavior isn't set by what came before, but randomly decided in real time. But for the no free will camp, this doesn't affect their argument. They think that since quantum processes are random, they don't allow you to make any decisions. Because if there's randomness for the things that fundamentally make up your brain and body, these random processes make the decisions for you. How?
So now we're getting into the difference between separating free will and random decision-making versus at least what I think of an NPC. Now, I'm by no means a gaming expert, but at least in the games I've played, like RPG type games, they have a set amount of answers and interactions based on certain conditions within the game. And the game doesn't... I've yet to play a game that was truly random. So, unless there are more advanced video games out there that I just simply haven't played before, I don't see how this equates to an NPC.
An electron can randomly go right or left. If it goes left, it triggers electric currents between your neurons that create a neuronal process which triggers a long chain of actions that make you watch a YouTube video. Or it goes right and makes you clean your room. Just because the chain is extremely complex doesn't mean you have any control over it. So maybe your fate was not decided at the Big Bang, but it is decided at this very moment.
And that's also to say, who's to say you make that decision right in the moment? Like, you could have made that decision and in your subconscious mind already maps out what your plan was doing, say, right when you drifted off to sleep the previous night. It can get really fascinating how much, or how little, rather, decisions we actually make in the moment. Though you could argue a spontaneous decision is more on the side of the free will, not NPC argument, because that subconscious programming could lead you back towards some views the deterministic path. It's a little fuzzy because I still think we're talking philosophy rather than physics at this point.
The important part is that it's not decided by you. You get no say in this. You have no free will.
So if you're playing the game, wouldn't that actually make you the player character? Maybe this Maybe this particular scene isn't meant to be taken literally.
Wow. This is kind of a bummer because the argument fundamentally seems to make sense. Except, no, screams the free will side. This is a really bad way to think about the universe.
Wow.
You are the main character. We know that we can reduce everything that exists to its basic
But you're still a character, so you're not actually in there. This is what's fascinating.
principles and the laws that guide them. While this makes physics feel like the only scientific discipline that actually matters, there's a problem. You can't explain everything in our universe only in terms of particles. One key fact about reality that we can't explain by looking just at electrons and quantum stuff is emergence.
Yes.
Emergence is when many small things together create new fundamental traits that didn't exist before.
Or something as, or you go full circle where you develop a civilization capable of advanced particle manipulations to create nuclear power plants, because you're creating people, you're creating a civilization, knowledge, technology, all the support systems, mechanics, plumbers, electricians, operators, engineers, lawyers, investors, and a few other dozen categories of people in order to create a system complex to essentially take you all the way back down to the subatomic level to provide power for said society, which emerged from a group of people. It's fascinating.
Of water is just a sextillion H2O molecules. If you get water on your pants, they get wet. But what is wetness? H2O molecules are not wet, but your pants are definitely wet now.
Yep.
Many small things together just
like an atom split in two isn't hot, it's what it does to the environment around it.
it's something new that doesn't exist at the level of the individual molecules. Emergence occurs at all levels of reality, and reality seems to be organized in layers. Atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organs, you, society. Put many things in one layer together and they'll create the next layer up. Every time they do, entirely new properties emerge. One atom can't handle information, but many of them together can form a DNA molecule. Molecules are not alive, but many of them can form a cell, and cells are alive. With each jump up the complexity ladder, the rules of what's possible change. Completely new things emerge that are much more than the sum of their parts. And here, the reductionist view of the universe breaks down. The layers of reality need each other to make sense. You can explain living things with cells, cells with molecules, and molecules with atoms. But because of emergence, you can't start with quantum particles and reconstruct the universe.
Sure.
You can't explain galaxies with quantum mechanics or human psychology with quarks.
That's funny. Yeah, you have to go up each of the layers.
This is not the whole story. Reality is not just structured in layers, but for some reason, the layers are also largely independent of each other. Things existing within the same layer can influence each other and maybe a layer up or down. But often they don't seem to influence things much higher up or down. To figure out how your organs work, you don't need quarks. To understand politics, you don't need to know about cells.
But to make a nuclear power plant, you do need to know about engineering, metallurgy, mechanical, electrical skills. And if you're going to build one, you'd know a bit about investments and legal proceedings. So I guess it kind of depends, and there's exceptions to each step. Now, back to the whole NPC thing, though. There is one view that if essentially NPCs, drones, purely autonomous people ran a nuclear power plant, that there would at least be precision and consistency with limited opportunities for human error. No deviating from procedures that could eventually put you in a Chernobyl type situation. And they would have all the training backlogged based on whatever program you had these NPC reactor operators decide to do. The problem is you can't completely design for every single situation. And nuclear power plants require main character level complex decision making, especially in emergency situations. So none of these NPC subroutines going in on autopilot will work in every situation. Though I do remember times towards the end of my initial license training, we kept running the same routines over and over again. I almost felt like an NPC for a moment, but you can't program everything. and a moral decision like making an evacuation decision, which if you're ordering an evacuation, some people are going to die just because there will be panic, traffic jams, fear, stress. So an evacuation is not always the conservative answer that's going to be the optimal solution in any particular scenario. So you need that active human main character, player character mindset. Though we could see a happy medium with the true NPCs, the AI, acting as an assistant that doesn't tire, doesn't need to sleep, provide 24/7 analysis to help the player characters make decisions, in addition to acting as a backup if something happens to all your player characters. So it isn't game over when all the player characters are wiped out in your control room, for instance. Anyway, how would you feel about the idea of pure NPC characters running a nuclear power plant, or effectively a nuclear power plant being a non-player function? I think it would be pretty weird, but there have been moments in my career that I felt like that.
If you want to explain things happening on one layer, you can only do that by staying close to that layer. No, screams the no free will camp in frustration. You can't just use magic to explain free will. But the emergence argument doesn't invoke magic. It just says that thinking about free will in terms of determinism and fundamental laws is a dead end.
What's interesting is magic has kind of shown up initially as an explanation of things that we didn't fully understand yet. This makes me think of when beta decay was first discovered. Physicists were all confused by it because the energy spectrum was a continuous spectrum by the beta particles, which would suggest that energy conservation is being violated because of the inconsistency. So there was Pauli's hypothesis in 1930, which basically said, hey, there must be this other particle, this other magical thing that we haven't quite discovered yet. And this thing's got to be electrically neutral and super, super light in order for it to evade detection. Didn't use the word magic. What's interesting is Pauli actually called it a neutron. This is before the actual neutron or neutrinos were really discovered. And then it got its name changed to neutrino after the neutron was discovered. But he effectively said this was some magical little thing to explain what just happened, and actual neutrinos were not detected until 1956. So it's interesting where magic is thrown in for things that we don't quite understand yet.
Kind of category error, like trying to explain galaxies by looking at your digestive tract. It's part of a reductionist school of thinking.
Unless you're referring to the Galaxy Candy Bar or Milky Way Candy Bar.
The universe that very successfully shaped science for a long time, but that's challenged by emergence. So maybe trying to understand free will by looking at fundamental particles, deterministic laws, and quantum mechanics misses the point. The question we should be asking is, which layer of reality is relevant to free will? Well, just like no individual molecule creates wetness, not a single cell in your brain wants to watch YouTube. But one layer up, your brain, made of 80 billion interconnected neurons, does. On this layer, all the things relevant to you emerge: your consciousness, character, feelings, your fears and dreams. This is where you emerge. We don't know why and how, but we know that you're here right now. How all the things going on.
And then at this point, you get into the metaphysical views, or possibly the spiritual views, that we extend far beyond our brain and our body. But I think that might be a bit much for this particular topic.
Brain play off each other to make you who you are is a whole different can of worms. But on this layer of reality, you are part of the decision process. Because at this level, you are just one more physical cause of whatever happens in your brain. You are shaped by your decisions, and your decisions are shaped by you. You have a say about this layer of reality. You are not just witnessing how the universe inside you unfolds, you're actually taking part in it. And you're free to do so however you see fit. At least this is how some on the free will side see it. Conclusion and opinion. So, who's right? Is there free will? We don't know. If you ask us personally, we think the argument for free will is more appealing because it brings the complexity of the universe to the table. Maybe existence is just the sum of its parts, but at least for now, it seems the universe is not that simple.
Yeah, I would argue that just based on what you see in nuclear physics, the fact that mass energy is different from the sum of its parts, that should tell you that being on the sum of your parts is a bit off. After all, none of us would exist if that was the case, because the sun wouldn't be able to produce nuclear fusion, so there you go.
Even if we don't have free will, it's not clear what that changes for practical purposes. You and us, we humans, on a purely subjective basis, feel like we have free will and that your decisions are yours to make. As long as we're not sure either way, and if it feels like you're making decisions, what does it matter if a non-existent supercomputer could have calculated the future at the Big Bang? Or if quantum stuff all the way down randomly nudges your cells one way or the other? Free will that feels free is good enough for us.
And that's where you go back to the whole philosophers that think determinism and free will are actually somewhat compatible, because even though you're part of this machine, this predestined plan, you still have the feeling that you're making your own decisions, and it could also have some branching paths depending on how this plan or magical computer made it out to be.
Case. Now you can decide what to do next. Maybe get some stuff done. Or watch more of our videos. It's your decision. Probably.
When they combine some aspects of science and philosophy, I still feel we have free will, and I still think free will should be utilized when operating nuclear power plants. You don't want to get too stuck in autopilot. You don't realize what's happening. Thanks so much for the recommendation, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.